Thank you, Sudhama Prabhu,
Yeah,
for
Prabhu.
organizing this program. Uh, I am here situated in a far corner of India in Assam, in a rural village. So my setup will be looking very rural because I'm sitting inside a farm in a small shed next to a farm in one of the tribal districts of Assam. Am I audible? Is my
Yeah, yes,
sound
Prabhu.
quality
Yes,
okay? Yeah.
yes.
And the audio quality is, I mean, video quality is also okay?
Yeah, yeah, yes, Prabhu.
Okay, so thank you. Uh, so I would try to present to you today uh, some basics on which our other speakers will build up, because we will actually work, as you see, we will finally come towards cow and cow care. But before we come to the concept of cows and cow care, it is important to understand the linkages between cows and cow care, and also what is the basis of holistic management. So I will try to bring these points out in very basic qualities today, try to bring in the linkages so that in the next few days, as we, and next few sessions, as we speak further and further about the whole concept of holistic management, we become more and more clear about these things, because the issue is, as I will be showing, that we are no longer being holistic in our dealing with nature and even in our own lives, and as a result of which we are having severe problems. So can I share my screen?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes.
Okay, so I will start today's program with my slides. Just one second, I'm just trying to set up the share screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay,
Yes, yes.
all right. So we will start with this very basic point of that life on this earth is not possible without fertile soil. And as the quality of soil or fertility of the soil degrades, what we will have is a degraded life. So it is very important for us to understand all the linkages with the soil and what we have as we build up the soil. Before I go any further, I would just like to state that since I am living in a farm here, you may see some farm-like uh, situations, people around me. So please do not mind that, because I'm actually right there in this. Right in front of me is acres and acres of paddy field. So anyway, coming back to this point is that life anywhere is not possible if we do not have fertile soil. And as fertile soil degrades, life will degrade. So now let us see what was the situation. Now, these are things that we see from our past. This is from the Bhagavad Puran. This is at the time about 5,000 years ago, during the time, the reign of Maharaj Yudhishthira. This is what is the description of the earth. And sometimes we may think this is maybe exaggerated, but let me show you that exaggerations are not there. Rather, it was a truth. And as life is degraded, as soil is degraded, we are seeing the degradation of our society. This is from the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavata, 10th chapter, verses 4. It says Kamam Vavarsha Parjanya Sarva Kama Dugamahi Sishi Shusman Brajan Gavaha Payodhashpati Muda. This is explaining what is happening on the earth during the time of Maharaj Yudhishthira. And mind you, there are 2 more verses which will give you a full picture of what was the situation at that time. It says here, the cloud showered all the water that was needed, the people needed, and the earth all the necessities of man in profusion. It is said, Kama, Sarva Kama Dughamahi. That means all the necessities of man are produced by the earth with the help of the rain that comes. And there is definitely a talk right now that we hear in most parts of the world that the rainfall is decreasing. Yes, it is decreasing, but not significantly enough in the last 100 to 200 years as we have of the records that we have today. Which shows, of course, the number of rainy days have decreased, but the total amount of rainfall has not significantly decreased. So we are still getting a good amount of rainfall, but the earth is not producing all the necessities of man in profusion. And let us understand the other part of it. Due to its fatty milk bags, the cheerful attitude, the cow used to moisten the grazing ground with milk. Means it had so much milk that, and it's so much grazing ground and so much milk that it was even overflowing and making the grazing ground muddy with its milk. Now, this is something which is quite strange when you hear. But anyway, let's look at the next verse. Nadya samudra giraya shavanaspati virudhaha phalanti oshadaha sarvaha kama anvrittu tasyavai. The rivers, oceans, hills, mountains, forests, creepers, and active drugs in every season paid their tax quota to the king in profusion. So that means all the rivers were full, the oceans had plenty to provide. It provided drugs, it provided pearls, it provided all what was needed, timber, fiber, whatever was required, food, and paid its quota to the king, who, king means it's the person who is in charge of the earth, was actually providing everything to him. And what is the result of this? We see this. Nadhyo vyadhya klesha deva bhutatma hetavaha ajata shatrava bhavan jantunam radki karhichid. Which means because the king had no enemy, the king was known as Ajata Shatru because Yudhishthira Maharaj did not consider anything as an enemy. He did not find anyone as his enemy, not even a virus as his enemy, just to make a modern point. So he didn't see anything as an enemy. And as a result of what we saw in the previous verse, that everything was going on, the sufficient rain to produce all the requirements, and therefore all the rivers, the ocean, which is 3/4 of the world, and the mountains were full of all the requirements that was required by human beings. Kamam anvrittu tasyavai. It was providing all that is required, and as a result of that, no one was disturbed by mental agonies. Deva bhutatma hetavaha nadhya vyadhya kleshaha. They did not have nadhya vyadhaha. They did not have these difficult kleshaha, these miseries from deva, that means environmental issues. Bhuta means other living entities or diseases, or hetavaha, or mental or personal agonies, or personally created. Because and also the king did not see anyone as his enemy. He was treating everyone as friend. He was treating everyone as someone that is desirable. And even if someone does behave inimically towards him, he wasn't behaving inimically towards them. Rather, he was behaving out of compassion for them. So anyway, this is a view that we have today of, and mind you, this is something we may look, which is maybe sometimes because we've been told that this is all mythology. It's not mythology. This is a reality which was there. And as I'll show you in the next slide, this is what we have a recording from Plato in the 4th century BC. Now, see, look at this. Now, this is what he says. Now, what now remains of the formerly rich land is the skeleton of a sick man. Now, what he's talking in the 4th century BC, that is almost 2,000 plus years ago, almost 2,300 plus years ago. This is before Christ. And he says, what remains of the formerly rich land is the skeleton of a sick man with the fat and soft earth having wasted away and only the bare framework remaining. So this is what we see in the previous one, fatty milk bags of cows, moistening the earth, plenty of pastures, mountains and hills full of all kinds of requirements. And this is what we see here. This is 2,300 years ago. Formerly, many of the mountains were arable. Can you believe it? It was arable. Arable means it is cultivable. The plains that were full of rich soil are now marshes. Hills were gone. Anyway, the hills can't produce anything now. And even the plains are full of marshes. Hills that were once covered with forest and produced abundant pasture. Now, see this. The hills produced pasture. Pasturing land was in the hills. Now produce only food for bees. Isn't it amazing? I don't know how many of y'all have actually lived in the forest. You will actually see this when you go to the forest. This is what the situation is. There's barely anything in the hills and the forest, because that's where I lived for about 20 years in the western Ghats of India. And the hills are really denuded, very hard to live there. So next, once the land was enriched by yearly rains, now again, kamam bavarsha parajanya, as we saw before, which were not lost as they are now by flowing from the bare land into the sea. The soil was deep, it absorbed and kept water in the loamy soil, and the water that soaked into the hills fed springs and running streams everywhere. So this is what a beautiful explanation is about the soil. It was deep. It soaked all the water that came in, and then it actually fed the springs that fed streams, and that's fed all the people around. Now the abandoned shrines at the spots. Now the abandoned shrines at the spots were formerly where the springs attest that our description of the land is true. Actually, previously, all springs, whenever they came out, perennial springs actually worshipped. We even see it in India, that places, the places where the springs come out, like we have at present of Gomukh, that is of the Ugam Sthan, or the place where Ganga comes out, or the Yamunotri, are still places where we worship. And similarly of Godavari and all the other rivers, Kaveri, Tala Kaveri, which is in the Western Ghats. So all these things are seen, but eventually we will see that even in the area where I'm living, we have the springs which originate the river in our area, which had actually shrines there. But now we're seeing that the springs have shifted, and it looks like we will not, the springs are actually drying up in those areas. We have a river there in our area, which was previously perennial, even in 50 years ago, is gradually becoming a seasonal river because of the lack of soil, deep soil, which will absorb the water. Now, this is what we need to understand, that all our needs, food, energy, water, shelter, clothing, transport, are ultimately derived from plants. And common sense, and all this, and a wide variety of plants capture the solar energy and start the cycle of life, because we are not autotrophs. We do not produce our own food. We have to depend on food produced by plants. Not just food, fibers, timber, medicines, oils, so many things that we need actually come from plants. And these plants need soil to grow and do their function. This is common sense, right? So I'm just repeating it because there's a very wide variety of people who have joined this course. And therefore, I'm just trying to make sure that we understand what we are trying to, why we're doing a course on dirt to soil. Now, a soil that does not support good growth of plants is no longer called soil. It's just dirt. That's the difference between something that you sweep out of your house. It's called dirt because it cannot support life. It does not have life. So if the soil to which the plants are rooted is poor, and so the plants also function very poorly. So therefore, all of us who depend on these plants for survival, when the condition of the plants become poor, our condition also becomes pitiable and miserable, as it is happening today. And when this happens, when our soils are turning out poor, there is very little attention being given to the soil in our total civilization currently. There is small efforts to actually change it, but majority of the people are not bothered about the soil because we are mostly living on in cities. And as we're living in cities, and we've grown up in cities and have very little contact with soil, we do not really understand the importance of soil to the conditions of life that we are producing. Okay, so and when the soil starts becoming poor, no matter how much arrangements we make with our apartments, computers, money, bank, etc., it cannot help, as we are seeing today. But we are just seeing one pandemic. We are actually all caught up with one pandemic. But mind you, it is not the only pandemic that is running in the world. We have a diabetic pandemic. We have a heart problem pandemic. And we have a cancer pandemic, which is spreading all over the world. We are still trying to fight cancers. We're still trying to fight HIV and a lot of other things like that. And of course, malnutrition. Another thing that we are fighting against, which is coming up in a big way, is mental health, obesity. So these are all pandemics coming at a different level. So when all these are happening, our computers, our apartments, our whatever, cars, etc., cannot help because the plants on which we are dependent are very, very poor because they are growing on poor soil. So we'll just start with what causes poor soil. Now, most of us who live in the cities would probably not at all understand what all this has to do with soil. Now, let us try to understand this. This is taken from Top et al. And Top and his associates who made this very nice presentation on how soils are behaving today. Now, as soil breaks down, as the soil structure breaks down due to different kinds of tillage and other disturbances to the soil, what happens is that the aggregates break down. We will explain to you what is aggregates. And the surface becomes compacted and crusted. I'll show you what that means. It means this. Diagram figure number B is when the aggregates are lost. That means the soil that has soil particles are aggregates, they are there. But then when they are in between that, when there are organic matter, then they are not packed up like this, as we see in figure number 2, figure number B. But in figure number A is where a proper aggregate is there. When figure number because of the lack of organic matter in the soil, what we see is uh, these soil particles actually come together and become very compact. They compact together because there's nothing to separate them. And as they become compacted, then the rain cannot get inside. So this is what it means. The surface becomes compacted, crust forms, organic matter decreases because of as the aggregates break down. And one of the reason is tillage, or again and again performing different activities, mechanical disturbances to the soil, or several other reasons why the organic matter is no longer in the soil. And as this increases, it increases the runoff and erosion from the soil because the organic matter actually prevents the erosion of the soil. As the soil, and this further decreases organic matter in the soil. And as this decreases, the water storage capacity of the soil decreases. This also decreases the diversity, or there are a lot of living organisms that are living inside the soil. That is far more than what we can see above the soil. In fact, this is something a lot of us will not realize how important it is to have a diversity of organisms living in the soil that is going to make our plants healthy, our soils healthy, our lives healthy, will actually keep the soil from will actually help the soil absorb water, absorb the heat, increase aeration in the soil, reduce the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, etc. So as a result, as these things happen, as there's less water in the soil, less storage of water, fewer nutrients for the plants again, the crop yields decrease. As the crop yields decrease, we have hunger and malnutrition. And with the increase of hunger and malnutrition, what results is epidemics, pandemics after pandemics, droughts. And then we have people leaving the rural areas or agrarian-based societies and moving towards the ghettos that are created in the names of cities, or so-called towns and urban areas where we're not connected with the soil. And then people are disconnected from the land, try to form new societies in the cities and somehow try to survive. While surviving in the cities, they will again, with this movement of people from the uh, non-producing people, people who are not connected with producing food, when they live in the cities, we have a whole urban culture which revolves around a lot of urban ideas like urban entertainment, because urban people have a lot of free time, a lot of urban kind of activities, uh, which have nothing to do with the soil and soil productivity and environment. Or rather, it is creating an artificial world with artificial necessities and artificial requirements. But none of the cities can survive without the food, the water, the air, etc., that is being supplied from the land, which is where our whole source of our necessities are. Now, as we do this, we will see more and more conflicts taking place because urban areas do not produce any so-called uh, necessities of life. They only use the necessities of life. They do not produce any necessities of life. So rather, they're dependent on the soil and the waters and the rivers for their requirement, but they are not connected to that. And as more and more people move towards the cities, we will see more and more conflicts in the cities because there's not enough food. They're dependent on a whole lot of logistics and other factors that bring food to the cities. And as these things are disrupted, or as profiteering starts in the process, life in the cities become very complicated and are very difficult to manage. And it results because of the lack of, and the time and the distance and the effort taken to move food from these areas to the urban areas, there is lack of nutrition. And as lack of nutrition takes place, then we again have plenty of uh, then we all have a problem with diseases that will keep coming again and again. Now, let's move to the next part of it. So, this is what we will say is the aggregate. Sorry, I'm sharing it again. So, this is what is happening as a result of the compaction that we talked about here. Now, one of the most important things that we have to understand in this is that as we mechanically do activities that decreases organic matter in the soil, that is, we reduce the amount of soil, what do you call it, organic matter that is produced, or um, uh, the residues, the agricultural, the organic residues from going back to the soil, because most of it is coming to the cities or is turning out to become products in the, there is a hunger of the soil and the hunger of the human beings, or the hunger of the organic or the living beings, but there is now another hunger of the machine. And this hunger of the machine is taking away most of the organic products and organic matter that actually has to go back to the soil, is going into machines to produce products, and then further going to the cities where it is not brought back to the place from where it is produced. And in the cities, it is causing waste management problems, or it is causing pollution. And again, what is happening because of the lack of organic matter in the soil, which actually does not allow the organic matter in the soil, does not package the soil particles very tightly, as we see in figure number B, and which causes crust formation, or it causes compaction. And as it compacts, it forms a crust on the top and does not allow the water to seep in. So we have a water problem today. So these are the root causes of a lot of problems that are coming up today. We will see as we go ahead. And one of the biggest problems that we have today is, in the last 70 years, 40% of the land that is arable land, that is cultivable land, have been abandoned. And because it is degraded because of this reason, and it is degraded because it is degraded, we are not putting back enough of the organic matter in the soil. We're using it in the cities. We're causing pollution in the cities, causing pollution in different other parts of the world. We're polluting the oceans, etc. And we're filling up the dams, whichever are available, whichever format we're doing it. But the areas which are producing food are becoming degraded. And as they're becoming degraded in the last 70 years, 40% of the land that was producing food has been abandoned. Can you believe it? 40% of the land has been abandoned. And as a result of which, we are going to new areas, cutting up the Amazon rainforest, the western parts, the eastern parts, northeastern part of the country, the Himalayan ranges, to grow more food. This is a disaster that is going on because we've not simply understood how to get the land to become productive again. It takes time, but once it is started, it shows results very fast. And as a result of the soil erosion that takes place because of this kind of activities, we are losing 10 to 15 tons of soil for every ton of food that is produced on the earth. And to reverse this, people like Dr. Albert Howard, etc., and other scientists of the world have said to produce organic food, we need at least 20 tons of compost per acre of land every year. Then we will actually start producing, or at least the food production will not go down. We will not need to go to new areas to produce food. This is an important thing to do. Those of us who would like to get into agriculture or already into agriculture, this is an area for you all to kindly look into and think deeply how to do it. This is why we are holding this seminar, so that we can give you some methods. And one of the easiest methods to actually uh, bring back organic matter in the soil is to change the way we think about the land and our lives. And of course, the animals and the tools that we have to do this. So, as I was mentioning to you, we have now reached a point where we are opening up marginal lands which are not actually arable, which are not actually to be cultivated, like the shallow hillsides. The hillsides, because of steep slopes, are actually do not hold so much of soil because it gets eroded with the heavy rainfall. Whatever rainfall comes, it does not actually accumulate so much of organic matter. And unfortunately, we are moving to the hillsides for cultivation and trying to cultivate those areas and further increasing the problem. And next is we're moving to the arid areas, which need the land to be actually rested and recovered rather than to be coming to commercial agriculture. And these arid areas actually do not have sufficient rainfall to actually support agronomical activities. And what we are doing is actually depleting groundwater to actually cultivate in these arid areas, which are very fragile and can degrade very rapidly. As a result of which, we are not realizing what we are doing to the soils that are already good and arable. So it is high time that we really look into the areas and change our policies and how we manage these lands as we increase uh, uh, our understanding and our ability or our creative human using our human creativity to increase the organic matter in the soil. Organic matter is the growing matter that is carbon related, or the residues of crops and other biological matter needs to go back into the soil. Okay, so now as a result of which we're going and spoiling other areas, which can be actually be reversed. And if we do not reverse this, we will hardly have anything to live on, because uh, we are we're going to degrade more and more land if we do not reverse the process. And if we reverse the process, much lesser land can produce much more for our needs. Now, this is the statistics of the land that is being cultivated. And because a lot of us are from India, we will be surprised that India, being a relatively smaller country compared to a lot of other countries of the world, despite being one of the most populous countries of the world, or the second most populous country of the world, it has the maximum number of arable land or the cultivable lands. So all of us who are actually have some land, we have to make sure that we produce and make our lands more rich so that we don't need to go to newer areas for our requirements. And it is our responsibility to change this and bring this change. And this change will definitely take up, if you can change it, your neighbor will change. And then other people will change, saying you change this. So in spite of having so much of land in India, why is India so poor? Why is it that we have such huge immigration problems, migration from the rural areas to the cities constantly going on in India? Every city in India, I repeat, every city in India is doubling every 5 years. Everything is doubling in the cities. The population is doubling every 5 years. So is the pollution. So are the number of cars. So are the number of crimes. And so are the number of other problems that we have. I am currently staying in Assam. Being situated here for some time. And we have a severe problem here. The daily requirement of electricity is 2,000 megawatts, and the state is producing only 350 megawatts of power. Now, this is what is happening because as the temperatures are increasing in the cities, we are using more and more electricity for more and more activities and transportation of food, etc. And as a result of that, as the country is heating up, we need more electricity to survive in these areas and during the summers. And then in the winters, we need more electricity to heat up. Anyway, but the good news is that we can reverse all this. if we can make soil rich again. And soil is only resource that we have. All the other resources, the minerals that we have, the water, are all actually non-renewable. So what we can make the difference is that soil can be renewable, and the way we can renew soil is organic matter. And organic matter is the green matter, or these plants, and mainly the plants that grow on the soil, which have carbon as a basic, what do you call it, a basic element in which, in all that is there. It is carbon based. Organic matter is carbon based. So carbon based matter, if we can increase this in the soil, it makes a lot of difference. Now we will see how it makes a lot of difference. Organic matter can improve the conditions of our soil to have, and of course, we need to use our human creativity. We have a God given ability to be creative, how to use different things. And as we put in more and bring back more and more organic matter in the soil, we will see a lot of changes that take place. Now, just see one thing that can take place when you increase the organic matter in your soil by 1% only. It has, of course, it's not so easy to do this, especially in areas which are cold or in sandy soils. It is difficult to increase organic matter to even 1%. But in clay soils, it is possible to increase organic matter more rapidly. And even in loamy soils, it's a little difficult. And of course, in hilly areas and forested areas also, it is difficult to increase the organic matter. I mean, in the soil, deep in the soil, difficult. But that's what is required, is that uh, we need to use our creativity for that. So there is no given way of doing it. There's no one solution to doing it. We have to use our creativity to do it. Now, with 1% organic matter increase, it has got the capacity of increasing crop yield by 12%. In fact, for every percent increase of organic matter in the soil, it can hold up to 98,000 gallons of water per acre. It can hold a huge amount, 72,000 liters of water per acre, or something like that can be held. And it can keep on increasing your water holding capacity in the soil. It also allows water to go deeper into the soil and even into the groundwater, recharge the groundwater, which is now again flowing away because it is crusted and it does not allow the water to go in. And then again, further increasing the floods and runoffs. So now this is what we are talking about when we say we are going to add organic matter. Now, when we grow crops, there's a lot of residue that comes out. And most of us, as even in India, this is happening, is that a lot of our farmers just burn the residues that are there. They think they're useless, and add more carbon dioxide in soil, in the atmosphere. But the carbon dioxide, or the carbon that is there, and the organic matter with carbon in it as a main factor, when they are coming back into the soil, this is what happens. Please try to see, this is a very beautiful diagram produced by an organization in America, very beautifully produced. When we grow crops, all the residues from the crops have to actually come back to the soil, everything, as much as possible, except for what is absolutely required for our existence. The rest of it has to come back. We will talk more about it. Living crops actually are even better, but at least the residues have to come back. When the residues come back into the soil, what happens is that residue has to be broken down, and they are broken down by biological activity, not by mechanical activity. It has to be broken down by biological activity only, because it is only biological activity that will actually make it available for the plants to be used. Otherwise, it will remain as an inorganic substance. It will only go into oxidation. So the importance of biological activity is why it is so important, so that we don't use chemicals that will actually reduce the biological activity, and your soil will remain poor even in spite of putting in all the residues of the crops. So coming back to it, it'll increase biological decomposition, and it'll decompose biological activity will lead to decomposition, and it will also detoxify whatever you have in the plant, even in the soil, and then it'll go back into the soil. Next that happens is reduces soil-borne diseases. It actually has a, what do you call it, prey-predator relationships, which will actually reduce any kind of uh, diseases that can be born. Even, well, we were talking about different things that can affect us. No harmful uh, microbes, etc., whatever is there, will be taken care of by this increased biological activity. Then we have decomposition, which decomposition is not a one-time process. It's a several year long. I mean, several probably goes on for several years, at least a 3 to 5 years time to decompose. That is actually depending on, of course, harder substances like sclerenchymatous tissues, etc., which will actually take much longer to break down in the soil, like wood and etc., the woody structures, the lignins, etc. And then there are other ones which will decompose first, and then slowly they will decompose over the years. And even if it's decomposed, it decomposes from one level to another level, then another level to another level, and different living entities, living bacteria, etc., will keep working on it, and fungus will work on it, and different things will work. First, the bacteria will break down certain parts, then the fungus will break down the nematodes. The other animals, the earthworms, the other things will actually start breaking it down and use it for its own food and its own lifestyle. And this decomposed material will actually find its way, as we mentioned before, in the soil particles. As the living organic matter remains on the soil, and the bacteria and all the the micro and the macroorganisms, the plants and the animals, they will all come and attack those for their food, and they will bring it down into the soil and mix it up with the soil. And therefore, you will have what is in an aggregate structure of the soil. Now, thus the aggregation will increase, and this will improve the tilt. And what is tilt means the softness of the soil. Why do you actually plow the land? To increase the tilt, so that the softness of the soil, so the water will go inside, the seeds can be put inside, and the roots will spread, etc. This is why we actually plow the land. But of course, plowing, we don't understand that kind of a plowing does not actually, and we think we do deeper plowing, it is better for the roots to go. But in fact, just the opposite happens. I'm sorry, I don't have a slide now to show that. What actually happens when you go deeper and deeper it actually creates more and more crust, because it exposes all the organic matter and makes it go up, oxidizes it, or with the heat and the um, exposure to the wind and the heat, it goes away in terms of wind erosion or water erosion, and it oxidizes and does not actually go into the soil. It is not taken in by the living entities into the soil. So therefore, it goes away from the top. And as the tilt and the aggregation improves in the soil and the organic matter increases in the soil begins to store a large quantity of water, which again leads to to much better storage of water, and then healthier plants. And of course, humus is another important thing. I will not deal with it today. Humus is a much deeper thing to have to understand of how it actually stores carbon in the soil for longer areas and longer periods, and actually helps the plants to uh, make available other forms of nutrients which are very difficult to grow. So all this is a process by which we see here that they are uh, so these are the 7 healthy attributes or healthy things that we would like to see in the soil. that is fertility, to have sufficient supply of nutrients throughout the growing season, and to have it sustainably going on. We need a good structure, as we said. It should allow water to go inside, it should have sufficient aeration, it should be allowing the roots to penetrate into the soil, deep into the soil, and get its uh, proper anchorage and water and nutrients from the soil. It needs to have good depth, it needs to have loose enough soil to go and infiltrate water and air into the soil, allow sufficient aeration so that the roots can breathe, because roots actually breathe out carbon dioxide and use oxygen. So if the soil is highly compacted, then the roots, when they go down, they do not have sufficient oxygen to actually breathe, and it actually leads to poor health of the plant. So this is why drainage and aeration is very important. And without proper drainage and aeration, even if you have plenty of sunshine, water on the top, even though it looks like the root zone being deficient, uh, will actually have difficulty in doing proper photosynthesis. And the, and the rates of photosynthesis will actually decrease rather than increase. So therefore, we need to have, of course, we have to understand that certain plants need more water, but not all plants need water. Even rice actually doesn't need the kind of water that we think it needs. It needs much lesser water. And it also reduces, what we want in a desirable in a plant is that we want minimal of pests or plants, I mean, those who will affect the growth of the plants, that will affect the plants, because healthy plants naturally repel pests. So anyway, these are basic things that, because each one of them is very deep, we will go at our different speakers will go into different aspects of it. We will discuss all these things further. It should be free from toxins, and as we have more organic matter and the cycle is proper, then we do find that the amount of toxins in the soil reduce, and even toxins that are somehow inadvertently introduced or are already there in the soil can be taken care of by um, by the by the organic matter and the living organisms and the system of decomposition. So similar things like that, and we need resilience so that whenever there is some difficulty in the environment, say lack of rainfall, excessive rainfall, etc., we have to have resilient soils that will actually prevent damage or to our to the growth and the ability to grow food and other materials, food, fiber, timber in our soils. So this is what we say is our 7 uh, desirable attributes of healthy soil. And so why am I saying all this? I'm trying to remind you. Uh, for some of you all may know about all this and pretty much understand all this, but if you do not understand this role of organic matter in the soil and the importance of actually increasing organic matter in the soil does not become a priority for all of us, we will actually land up wasting a lot of our time trying to make our soils, I mean, our farms productive. Why are farms becoming less and less productive? Because we're not giving importance to the basic activities that are required in the soil, in our farms. Now, this is a very simple thing most of you all already know, but those who do not, there's only a very little amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And right now there's a lot of talk about it, carbon dioxide concentrations going up, the greenhouse gases, etc. And one of the most beautiful ways of bringing back the carbon dioxide or reducing the amount of carbon dioxide in the soil is to bring it back in the form of organic matter, because all organic matter, all plant, all life on this earth is basically carbon based. And even if you can bring back 1% of that back into the soil, it will reduce so much of gases in the world. So and our soils, now the connection between these two things is that our soils lack organic matter. And Even though our soils lack organic matter, we should understand that it is a simple way to bring it back. If we do not work on bringing back the organic matter in the soil, which is the very important thing that we need to bring our soils back, degrading soils back, our lifestyle, our cost of food that is going up again and again, cost of life, diseases that are going up again and again, is basically because of most of that carbon dioxide, which is actually supposed to be in the soil, is up in the air. And so bringing back carbon dioxide back into the soil will actually not only mitigate, in fact, if most of agriculture can bring back organic matter in the soil, we will have very little problem. Of course, we are not saying that we shouldn't stop burning fossil fuels and other things that are there. But yes, and industrialization, etc., those also have to come back. But one of the biggest things that can actually change a lot of these things is one of the game changers is to get back organic matter in the soil. And this is how organic matter, most of the organic matter that comes back into the soil that we see around is actually goes back into the atmosphere through uh, respiration and decomposition and other forms, etc. So annually during the rainy season or the wet season or all the springy season of the earth, we see a lot of carbon coming back into the soil, and of course atmospheric carbon dioxide going down, and then again it goes up because we put it back into the air and not into the soil further. There is far too much carbon dioxide or carbon in the atmosphere than it should be. So the point is that it should come back into the soil. And carbon dioxide, or carbon rather, is also a very important, because nitrogen is a very important requirement for growing food. I mean, we all know this. Nitrogen is required for producing the proteins, etc., and in the amino acids and proteins, etc., in the plant component. But nitrogen is 78% of the atmosphere. So why is it lacking in the soil? Because what holds nitrogen in itself cannot be there directly in the soil. The plants cannot absorb nitrogen in the soil directly. So what do they need to be? They are actually in connection with carbon. So if you reduce carbon in the soil, your nitrogen in your soil also reduces. And that is one of the reasons that by putting inorganic fertilizers or synthetic fertilizers in the soil, we are actually further reducing carbon in the soil, because the plants don't work so hard to produce carbon at that time, do not produce, because nitrogen is very easily available. And of course, hardly 10 or 15% of the nitrogen is used up, and most of it actually lands up polluting our waterways and further leaching into the groundwater, and goes back into the atmosphere, as you can see here already. So this is a very complex, what do you call it, activity, is because when we lack organic matter in the soil, there is nothing that will hold the nitrogen in the soil. So when organic matter is in the soil, we will see that it brings back the nitrogen in the soil in the form of organic matter, is mobilized, and it is utilized by the plants. It is taken up and it is harvested in the crop, and it's further brought back in. So if it is more and more is actually kept in the soil, more and more carbon is in the soil, you will the more and more nitrogen will also be there, because there's a lot of free living bacteria which is there, and also which also works with the fungi, etc., to keep a lot of nitrogen in the soil. And also nitrates, free nitrates especially, are very dangerous. Heavy nitrous oxides, etc., are very dangerous for human beings. So if we do not have organic matter in the soil, we will have these free nitrates, which after putting in our fields through in the form of synthetic fertilizers, will actually cause severe problems for us. So, okay, coming back to something very simple. So what are the additions that can actually add to organic matter in your soil? Is root exudates, that the plants produce more sugars than it needs, more, about 40% more sugars than it needs through photosynthesis, and it adds to the organic matter in the soil, because this additional food that is going into the soil through its roots attracts more microorganisms and fungi into it and allows more growth of plant life, root in the root region of the plant, and therefore increases organic matter in the soil. And it is lost through the process of respiration and others of soil, different soil organisms, and of course of erosion. So this is a simple method that we need to increase and reduce this. It's a very simple mathematics that we need to do. So if you reduce erosions and uh, oxidation of organic matter, then we will hold more organic matter in the soil, and it'll make our farm life or life in the farms much more easier. Now, for any growth to take place, we cannot have without, this is the cycle of life. If we want, we all love growth, but we do not love the other aspects of life, that is death and decay. But without the proper death and decay of the residues of the plants and all organic matter, and it has to go back to where it has come, to the soils which is growing it, it has to go back there. Not that it goes to the city and goes to some landfill, and then from there it goes to some other place. No, it has to come back to the land from where it is grown, because that is where it is decreasing. If we are decreasing organic matter and nutrients in the soil, we are not replenishing them in the place where we are. And therefore, in these places, there is degradation. And in those places where there's extra nutrients, we call it pollutants. And they're causing other problems there. So we have to understand that there is a balance between growth. We all love growth, but we don't like death and decay. But without a balanced system of death and decay, even in social terms, growth cannot take place. A healthy society, human society, cannot grow properly if the old people are not taken care of properly. The old will actually give impetus for growth. Old and decaying people will actually help the growth to take place better in a proper balanced way. When the old and decaying is not going on properly, the growth will not take place properly. This is a cycle of life. And this is very simple, but as we said in our presentation, that it is a common sense approach. If we do not do it, it's not going to work. Okay, so now let's coming back into this, building healthy soils, we have to implement a certain processes or practices that we have to use by our human ingenuity and creativity, is to add more organic materials to the soil. Add diverse, it's not just one type of organic material that needs to go back into the soil. We need to increase of varieties, as many varieties of organic material in the soil. And as we do that, because our soils require the variety, because plant life or human life, etc., need different varieties of nutrients to actually survive. So if we only add one type of organic matter in the soil, we're going to make the soil deficient. But of course, soils are resilient. The nature is quite resilient. Even if you start doing it at one phase, the other forms do come in. But we have to understand that it is always better to add a diverse sources of organic materials in the soil and minimize the loss of native soil native soil organic matter from the soil itself. So what should we do? We will talk about it. What we are saying is the next part is to provide plenty of soil cover or cover crops or surface residues to protect the soil from raindrops, temperature extremes, and also from the air. Air erosion is huge in some parts of the world. It can do pretty much same damage as much as water does to soil. So we need to cover them properly and see that it's not blown away, and it creates a proper mulch on the thing and protects the soil from being exposed. minimize tillage and other forms of soil disturbances, keeping soil plowed and exposed to the hot sun. That we will see even in, I think, in the coming sessions, we will see how keeping a land plowed and uncovered without an armor on the soil. The organic matter is an armor on the soil that reduces temperatures on the soil. If it's not covered, the temperatures can rise up to 60 to 70 degrees centigrade, which is practically frying up your organic matter in your soil and all soil life. Above 30 degrees temperature, 30, 31 degrees temperature, most of the soil life actually cannot survive in the soil. Just like we find it very difficult to survive above 30 degrees temperature, similarly also soil life can find it very difficult to actually survive in soil at such high temperatures. So when we keep the soil covered with organic matter, preferably growing green organic matter is even better, because green organic matter not only prevents the soil from degrading, it also provides food. Uh, it's producing food all the time to actually maintain good soil health and aeration. So if we can't do that, we have to do something to keep the soil cover going. Whenever we are traveling over soil with field equipment or farming equipment, we should see that our practices are such that it does not compact the soil and reduce the organic matter, so that we can maintain good soil structure, manage soil fertility to maintain good pH levels between uh, 5 and 7. I mean, not non-acidic. 5 is pretty high in acidic levels, but more or less from 6.4 to 7 is a very good for most plants to grow. Of course, there are differences. I mean, those who understand about plant growth, you know about pH, but more or less, if you can maintain optimum pH levels, and that is done with the amount of that is the organic matter actually helps to maintain the pH of your soil, and also prevents water from getting polluted. And of course, this is for arid regions, which the organic matter helps reduce sodium or salt content in the soil too. So these are things that will build healthy soils for us. So yeah, this is a question that a lot of people ask us, because there are a lot of now these newer techniques of growing plants, and there are different things like that. So like hydroponics, etc. In fact, you don't have to have any soil to grow food. In fact, you can grow it on gravel and sand and use hydroponics with something or the other. Without soil, can grow excellent crops, and but they're usually not economical, and needs very high technology, and nor is very ecologically very sound. This is what we have found from all the scientific studies that are there. It doesn't look like we can do it for a very long time. But apart from that, as soil organic matter decreases, it becomes difficult to grow plants, because it reduces the fertility of the soil, water availability of the soil. It leads to compaction of the soil. It leads to erosion of the soil. It leads to diseases in the plants because of poor plant health, because of poor root penetration. And with weaker plants, there is more pest attack. And therefore, you use more pesticides to counteract such weak plants and diseases, and other use of other fungicides and other things like that. So one of the best ways are to actually improve our health and the health of our lives and our families and our economies is to increase. Our economies are actually connected with the increase of organic matter in our soils. So without soil, it is not going to work. And this is what I've seen. This is which I read last year when I came, and this is from an editorial. It's of course an editorial in a kind of travelogue magazine, but nonetheless, it is quite important what the editor was writing. It says that by 2050, about 9 states in India are going to be regularly under drought, and eventually turn barren. And this is most of central India, which is today mostly, a lot of them are green and have forests today. And they say that the GDP is going to go down by 9% on an average, which is probably like 200 lakh crores or something like that rupees, which is going to be huge. And when this thing happens, people will migrate from these areas. They'll go to the areas where there is going to be more water. And when people migrate like that, you're going to have clashes, you're going to have fights, you're going to have riots, you're going to have so much thing, because the people in those areas where they have water are going to resist from people from coming, and it's going to increase population density in those areas where there is water, and there's going to be even more stress in those areas. So before that takes place, we need to change. Please understand it is becoming urgent by 2050, and it's not that it's going to happen only in 2050. It is going to happen gradually right now. And it's, as we say now, it's 30 years from now, but it's already a year old. And the serious consequences will face this earth. You're going to have serious strife, trouble, diseases, pestilences, fights, a lot of resistance going to go. And why wait for that time? We need to change these things right away. And the way to do it is, of course, is that we can bring the changes in our landscape and the way we live. We humans can do this by using, because we are a tool-using species. We use tools for everything that we do. Everything that you have around uses any one of these tools. Either we use technology, we use fire. You must be wondering what is rest and living organisms. Okay, so I will explain in very simple terms. Technology, most of you know some technical appliances, some tool that we use, some mechanical thing that we use, that is technology. Whether it is a simple crowbar that we use as a fulcrum to remove a weight, or simple knife, that is technology to cut up something. And then we have fire. We use fire for a lot of things, to manage a lot of things. And even we are managing our cropland with fire today. When we want to reduce the labor of a lot of stubbles or stubbles on the agricultural land, we use fire. We are also using fire to manage forests, but we're landing up doing a lot of damage to it. We're using fire to cook. We're using fire to make our instruments. We're using fire to make our technological tools. So we have a lot of things that we're using. But there is one thing that we also use, that is rest. Conservation is using it in a big way. We use rest to actually conserve forests. Whenever we think that we would like to conserve a particular area, we want no disturbances to go into that area. We want to rest that land. Even to grow rice on a paddy field, you have to rest the land so that no animals go into it, no one disturbs that, so that even birds, etc., so that you can get your these are our tools on which. So rest is also whenever you're sick. Like for right now, we have been through a pandemic, and during pandemics we have lockdowns, etc. And lockdowns are what? It's a system of resting the biological systems so that they recover. So rest is a way that we use, and of course we're using living organisms. This is a tool that we have to actually do things that we want to do, to actually shape our landscape and to live in this world. We use these 4 tools. Now, coming back to our seminar and our presentations here, living organisms are everywhere, whether it is yeast to make bread, or we have microbial growth within our stomach, which helps us digest our food, or you could talk about the animals that we use on our farms, the birds that are there. Everywhere, actually, there is living organisms that we utilize. Antibiotics are basically again, a tool, a living organism which produces antibiotic um, substances which will fight, are toxic to the other things. So right now we are saying now we do not need antibiotics, we need probiotics, and then we're looking to probiotics. The yeast, the curd that you make, the paneer, the cottage cheese that you make is all because of the organic activity or living organisms that are there. The beer and all that that is made is all from, even leather, we use organic activity to make leather. So all that is living organisms that we need is coming from there. So we have four tools to actually do anything. So here also we have to understand what to use and what not to use and how much to use. And of the living entities or the living organisms that we use, one thing that has been most misunderstood and not understood properly, even though it was a part of our tradition to use those things, is the use of cows. Cows are one of the most socially acceptable, socially adapted to humans, and culturally, socially, religiously, spiritually, is one of the most underestimated in the modern systems or ununderstood uh, tools that we have to actually bring back living organic matter into our soil. And that is something that you will see in the next, and I'm coming back to the point that organic matter has to go back into the soil, and we have only four tools to do that. Or use it or don't use it. We cannot use fire if you want to use an organic matter to the soil. We have to restrict the use of fire. We have to restrict the use of technology. It again has to be used scientifically, and living organisms and how to use it. Overusing living organisms also have a problem. If you overuse cows, also will have problems. So that is what we are going to talk about in our seminars that are coming up. And this is the end of, I'm just trying to end the whole thing. The point that we're trying to make is that when the world, few decades ago, this whole reductionistic approach has brought the whole world into a very difficult problem. What is the reductionistic notion, which is something that we continuously keep doing because that is how we are brought up. That is what has been put into us in our schools and colleges, and we think that is the way to do things, but this is not the way to do things. See, the notion that the world can be viewed as a machine, and the machine has its parts. And so if you just isolate its parts from the machine and manage each of the parts separately, then the machine will work properly. But the point is that the whole is greater than the sum total of its parts. This reductionistic paradigm is very dangerous because when we think that if we reduce those things into its components and manage them properly, the whole, any part taken out, when a part is taken out of its whole, just like a living entity is taken out of its whole environment and tried to be managed separately as a milking cow or etc., it is no longer functioning in the whole. And when a thing is separated from the whole is no longer a whole, and the part is also no longer a part of the whole, and it's not functioning the same way as it will be when it is a part of the whole. So anything that we take it out from the whole and try to manage it separately from the whole does not function as the whole, and the whole also doesn't function as a whole. So anything that is separated in that manner will not function. Similarly, you take a cow out of its grazing because it has four legs, it's got a mouth, it's got a whole digestive system, which is meant to actually be grazing. When you take it out from the cow, when the whole, it does not behave the way it should. So therefore, you talk about the methane that comes out of the cow because you have taken it away from the whole. You have made it less. You've taken it out from the whole, and therefore it is causing a problem. So at any point of time, this reductionistic approach has put the whole world into a real big problem, And we here are trying to tell you that this cannot work. Nature in itself has to be taken uh, as a whole. There's a human tendency to take decisions. Whenever we have to take a decision, we do take a decision either to solve a problem or to take care of a need, or that we want to fulfill a want, that we want to take care of a want. But rarely do we understand that the decisions that we are taking has linkages and unintended consequences of whatever we are trying to do, because we are life is complex and they're connected to so many other things. So through this process of our seminar, we're trying to present to you a more holistic understanding of nature. You cannot deal with the city without dealing with its water systems and its waste. You cannot deal with the city and its health systems without dealing with the food that comes into the city. So all this is going to, now we're trying to deal with the pandemic with only a very piecemeal approach, only with dealing with the microbes and the antibiotics, etc. We're not understanding the whole input. The health of a country, the health of a nation, the health of its people are not just dependent on one or two factors. It is a whole that has to be approached. So as our earth degrades, so will our plants will degrade, our animals will degrade, and then our cities and our villages, and so subsequently all the other efforts that we do, all our scholastic efforts, our monastic, our theistic efforts, our artistic efforts, our cultural efforts, everything will degrade as our earth degrades, because it is a whole. You cannot separate either one of them from the other. And here, today's presentation is an introduction. What I've been trying to do is trying to make you understand that life starts from from human beings, or rather our human lives. We have a conscious being. Being a conscious being, we have to understand our life is connected to the soil, to our and the soil is connected to life, and life is connected to the soil, and the soil is connected to the living organisms that we have around us. And it is a complexity that actually that makes everything work. So life is complex, and we need to deal with all the complexities together, not isolate them and try to deal with them separately. Everything has to be done at the same time. You cannot deal with a healthy cow without having a healthy soil. You cannot have a healthy human being without having healthy food and healthy environment. So nothing can be actually done in a reductionistic manner. So to end it here today, I will just again remind you of a few things that brings you back to the connection with the soil and soil life, healthy life, and of course, uh, a proper approach intellectually, also a proper intellectual life, a proper spiritual growth cannot take place without these things happening. In fact, in our Shastras, it is said, Ahara Shuddho Sattva Suddhe. Only when Ahara is Shuddha, then Sattva, existence, and willpower will become strong, will become pure. Our existence will become pure, willpower will be pure. Ahara Shuddho Sattva Suddhe, Sattva Suddhe, Dhruva Smritihi. Our ability to remember intellectual activity will become very strong if only our ahara is shuddha, or our food is pure. Ahara shuddho sattva suddhe, sattva suddhe dhruva smritihi, dhruva smriti sarva granthinam vipramoksha. Then we can know how to cut the knots of this material world. And the goal of life is to actually release the conditioned soul, or the Atma, who's connected to this world of birth and death, out of this world. And therefore, it has to go back to the basics. If we do not understand, we are from the soil, our life starts from the soil and ends in the soil. But in this process, we have to understand who we are and where we are coming from and where we are to go. Because it is the conscious being that is actually taking a decision on what to do. So with this, we will leave you and take leave from you as it comes to be 12:30. I now hand over the proceedings to our host, Vasudhama Das, to take over. Thank you, Vasudhama Prabhu. Please take over.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for this the wonderful presentation. Well presented. And now I request the participants to ask the questions. If anyone have any questions, they can raise their hands and ask the questions to the speaker. Yeah, the first question is from Prakash Gowda. Please go ahead with your question, Prabhu.
Yes, please unmute yourself, Prakash. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. It's really nice information, or really depth information about the soil and how
Your voice is a little bit low.
that.
Prakash ji, your voice is a little bit low.
Is it okay now?
Better.
Okay. Yeah. So my question is, it's about we talked about that. Okay, one point that okay we can also grow without soil, right? Yeah. So in my study, or maybe in some of the training, or maybe when I gone through this hydroponic training, so I heard that in water we cannot give all the elements of the soil, which for example silver, manganese, or whatever it is. So some of the things cannot be given through water, is what I heard. So I just want to know what are those elements which cannot be given, which actually soil gives when we grow plants. So in hydroponic, what are those chemical elements or elements which are generally available in soil, which cannot be given in hydroponic method?
Yeah, thank you, Prakash ji. Well, actually, because we're we're working on the soil. Uh, yeah, this is a very nice point that you brought up. That yeah, you cannot, because you actually have to give manufactured food that is produced from carbon-based food that you produce, and you put it into the you have to actually provide nutrients through the liquid medium to the plants. There are not just that, even gold and a lot of other aluminum, etc., cannot be given, especially aluminum and other materials cannot be given also, and heavy, a lot of other metals. And you see, the point that you're making is very important, that water cannot, it's actually not a medium for plants to grow, because there are so many materials that are required to give for a plant to grow. And human mind and human abilities, we can never actually come up with all the materials that we need to put into water, or to make an artificial medium to grow it, because we just don't know how much we have, because biologically speaking, even in our labs, we haven't been able to find out all the trace elements that are required, and also to understand that they are not going to be available in the format that they need. Different plants need it at different times in their different forms of their lifespans. And it is too difficult for us to human beings to actually judge every aspect of it and know when to give which one. Whereas when it is in the soil in a natural situation, it is already naturally adjusted. So life in the soil is God's creation, or it's a natural way that it is done. It is naturally done. Everything is, at its proper time, at the proper phase. When it is required, it takes it. When it doesn't require, it leaves it. It gives it back to the soil. Whereas it cannot do all of that when it is in an artificial environment like that, where it is being fed artificially. And a lot of other toxic materials can be produced, which will not be able to, even the exudes sometimes that the plant produces in the liquid form through its root system, it may not be able to adjust. It may not be able to take care of it. So therefore, it is very difficult for us to actually say which exactly. Some people will come up with a few things, but we, as biologists from the soil, we are saying that we cannot
just wanted to know whether I have to start with the hydroponic or maybe soil. So anyway, I decided to grow the plants or crops in the soil. That's really, it's fascinating, that how I mean to work with the soil. So always I thought that okay, that the soil fertility is very important than anything else. That because we will go, everyone will go to soil after that our the time has expired. So what I thought that okay, why don't we make that as a fertile and that um, you know chemical free. So that's how I'm starting. But maybe I have many questions. Maybe in the upcoming sessions I will ask. Today about
Sure.
soil. This is the only one question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prakash. You're very intelligent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I think.
The next question is from Kishore. Yes, Prabhu, please ask your question.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much indeed for the elaborate presentation on the importance of fertile soil. My question is pertaining to the importance, the role of nitrogen in the soil. Of course, you have touched upon that particular topic, but
Prabhuji, I think your voice is not clear.
Yeah.
How about now? Am I audible now?
It's
Yeah,
wavered
bit
off.
Yeah.
I think that could be because of the poor signal at my end, but I hope you can bear with me. I hope I can manage communicating the question. Yes, Prabhuji, is it any better now?
Still wavering.
Okay, then I'll put it in writing. I mean, I'll text it so that you could.
Yes.
Yeah. So there is a question here in the chat box. The other question from Pradeep.
Yes.
So he was asking that there is a myth around my farm that the bore and well water from that area is acidic and not suited for farming. Increasing humus and organic matter in the soil, will this help reduce the acidic value in the water, Guruji? Will it be balanced naturally?
Oh, yes. I think first and foremost, I think if there's a myth, it should get it tested. That will be the next best thing to do. And well water is, of course, should not be until unless there's some chemical, thing. And of course, most groundwater will get acidic if there is some kind of leaching in the form of some kind of chemical leaching that is going on, or the soil is highly acidic. So yes, naturally. Yeah, so therefore we can see that if you increase organic matter, it may not happen overnight, but yes, over the years it will definitely reduce it. That's for sure. As we increase organic matter and the soil health and soil aggregate and absorption, definitely the thing will change. But I think the first thing you should do is to get it tested and see how what is the real situation there. And then we can think about other things after that. But first and foremost, I think you need to get it tested, whether it is a myth or it's something true. And some simple systems of filtration could also work. But yes, definitely if you change, and borewell is again not a very deep borewells are not very good for the environment and for us also. Yes, I think that is my answer to it. And is it okay?
So yeah, I think the question again it
Kishore
is from Kishore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to hear a little more about the role of nitrogen in soil and its link to the increase in soil organic matter. Thank you in advance.
Yeah, thank you, Kishorji. Good question. Actually, the point that it requires an elaborate, actually, probably a good few minutes of presentation to make to the point that nitrogen is actually in its free form cannot actually be absorbed by the soil, and even when it provided in the form of fertilizers, it cannot actually be absorbed because nitrogen in the soil naturally is occurring in the form in combined with carbon. So when carbon reduces in the soil, or you try to give extra nitrogen through this kind of inorganic synthetic fertilizers, the plant which will actually be working to make these nitrogens or take this nitrogen. It's a whole complex cycle. When we talk about it, we need to go into the whole rhizosphere and the how it works, and the mycorrhiza, how it works, and how nitrogen is going to be taken up, and how within the mycorrhiza, within the root system, the mycorrhiza, there will be free living bacteria and other bacteria that will actually be are using the atmosphere, the nitrogen which is in the soil and also bound to the carbon particles in the soil, will be using and will be transferring it to the soil. The plant cannot take in nitrogen. It cannot take in. It can only take in through the roots, through connected, which are through some of the what do you call it? Um, nutrients, through the nutrient cycle that it takes in from the roots, through exchange of root exudates, etc., and absorption from the root level. That is the only way that can take nitrogen in. So, therefore, if you reduce carbon in the soil, the nitrogen fixing, or the ability of the soil to hold nitrogen and nitrogenous compounds in the soil, which will be further broken down and utilized by the microorganisms to exchange with the plant, will actually reduce. So the ability of the plant to actually take up nitrogen from the soil when it needs, at which form it needs, reduces, because when you're giving inorganic fertilizer, you're only giving it at a particular time. And most of this organic, what do you call it, inorganic fertilizers that you're providing into the soil actually goes back into the atmosphere or leaches out into the water. In fact, even after 2 days of after applying new nitrogen, you'll find very little of it actually in the soil. Whereas when organic matter is available in the soil and there is a lot of living entities in the soil, microorganisms, etc., the available nitrogen for the soil is there throughout its whole life period. And therefore, it can actually utilize nitrogen as and when it requires, not only in the growing season or not only at a time when you provide it synthetically. So therefore, nitrogen cycle is actually connected with the carbon cycle. So therefore, when the carbon cycle or the organic matter in the soil is lacking, the plants will be nitrogen deficient. So therefore, the way to actually increase nitrogen and nitrogenous availability of nitrogen in the soil for better period of time, better soil plant growth, and better and reduce our expenses of actually putting in synthetic nitrogen into the soil, is to actually increase organic matter. So if we increase organic matter, nitrogen is there for far longer period of the time for the plants to utilize. Um, is that a little okay for you? Is it gives you a little, answers a little bit of your question? Okay, Shorji. Okay. Is it?
Yeah, he said sure, thank you. Okay, so any more questions for the speaker?
One more question. This is Prakash Gowda here.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, we talked about the rest part, resting. Could you please elaborate more on this? Recently, even I made a comment about, that we should give a rest to the soil. But knowingly, unknowingly, I made that comment in one of the group because there was a discussion about it's not fruiting, it's not flowering. So I felt like that, that we should give a rest. But now you talked about the resting. So could you please elaborate? But how to do, when to do, I don't know. But I somehow it came from my mouth that we should rest. Could you please elaborate on that?
Yes, this is actually going to be dealt further when we're going to talk about grazing and when and how to rest the plant, at which time it should be rested, when it should be disturbed, and a proper cycle of disturbance and rest to the soil is an important factor. So in the growing season, there is a time when it should be what do you call it, disturbed, and there is a time when it should be rested. That if we do not rest the soil sufficiently for the plant to recover, and then again, what do you call it, graze it or disturb it. Disturbance is also required for the soil because then only things will grow. Otherwise, it will not grow. So when to do it and how to do it, a more elaborate discussion will be coming up when Dr. Sri Kumar will be talking about grazing, and I think more fundamentals will be clear with you when he talks about it. Okay, so please keep continuing with this, and you will see that he will actually be explaining it in a very much more way. And from grazing, you will be able to understand most of the things, even in pruning, when is the time to prune a tree so that it gives more rise to more growth. Everything is there. So we will discuss with this in the coming sessions of this seminar.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prabhu. And any more questions from the participants?
Yeah, I think it's...
I don't think so. So so to share the Sanskrit verse, yes, it will be shared.
Which Sanskrit verse? Sanskrit verses which I have given, and will be shared with you guys with the slides.
Yes. The small information I would like to share with all the participants that we are going to add all of you in our official Dirt to Soil group. In that group, we have already the participants who have already attended our previous sessions, and the present group which you are all into, that Dirt to Soil broadcast group. That group is specifically for to get the more updates on the programs and joining links and questionnaires and so many other things. That group is broadcast group is temporary group that will be deleted after the session and after the course, I mean to say. And the Dirt to Soil, the official group, it remains as it is. And we are recording this session, and we will be uploading in our YouTube channel shortly, maybe in 2 or 3 days, and that same links will be shared in the groups. And also the PPTs of all the sessions will be shared with all the participants only after the course, and the attendance is must, and also the questionnaires also to be attended. We will meet again tomorrow the same time at 11 a.m. So thank you very much for attending the today's session. And in our official Dirt to Soil group, you can also ask the questions to the speakers through voice message or through text, and you can address the the speakers, and you can ask any questions related to the Dirt to Soil. So thank you very much, and we will meet again tomorrow morning. Hare Krishna. Sarve Jana Sukhino Bhavantu. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Madhava Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.